accessing the New South Wales Colonial Secretary's records online. This is what I'm going to talk about. Those of you who attended the conference back in whenever, September, will remember Martin Killian's talk when he talked about the Colonial Secretary's records. And all the examples he gave, which were very useful, but they were all using the microfilm or the original records down there in State Records, down at the archives. But there's an amazing amount that you can get online. So I'll just move here, and you can get them on Ancestry. You can also get some on Family Search, but I'll come to that later. The way to get them on Ancestry is basically to go to the card catalogue, which I've said there on the search page. And on the search page for the card catalogue, enter in the keywords Colonial Secretary.
Narelle says she's not seeing the presentation.
Everybody else, yeah.
Everybody else should be seeing it because it's up there on the screen, which is coming from Zoom. Okay. Okay. Colonial Secretary has keywords. If you try and enter in the title field and it's not exact, goodness knows what Ancestry will do. You enter Colonial Secretary as keywords and you get one option, which is Colonial Secretary's Papers 1788 to 1856. Now, this is going to get you to the set of Colonial Secretary's papers that are actually the papers up to 1825. And these are the ones, of course, that have been indexed. If you scroll down on Ancestry from that page we were at, you will get a list of all the records that are there. So I'm just showing you quickly here what you would see on Ancestry for those records. And these are also in the Archives Resource Kit as microfilms. So if they're in our local library, they'll be in a lot of other local libraries. Okay, now you can, there is of course an index to this lot that's available on State Archives website. And so you can go there, go to the Colonial Secretary's papers and you can search the index. And you've probably all done this. I think we've mostly done this. The index is basically a whole set of PDF documents that are available online. You find them by going through the alphabet. I've gone here now to the M's and the MAs to the MCs. What I'm looking for is John McCabe, and you can see here where I've found a number of entries for John McCabe per the Guildford. Now, you can do the same, so you can do that search and using these references, I'll just see if I can do something here. No, yes, you can see that. Yes, you can see real numbers here. So you can go to the Archives Resource Kit and look up those real numbers, those page numbers, and see those records. But if you want to go to Ancestry, you can search this collection in Ancestry by name. So you can search for John McCabe, and you'll get a list of stuff for John McCabe. You can view those records, you can view the images, etc. on Ancestry. But if you look here, the lower part of this screen is what I found on shows you what's in the index on State Archives. The lower one that I highlighted there does not show up on Ancestry through the index. Now, I don't know why, whether it's the way Ancestry's got them indexed, but it doesn't show up. If you want to find that particular document, you'll probably have to, on Ancestry, through the index, you'll probably need to search for Allman and scroll through all the stuff for Allman until you get to the relevant date and find the letter. If you type the date in, you might not find it. I don't know, because for some reason it did not turn up with John McCabe. So it's probably reflects the way Ancestry have done the indexing. I'm not going to talk any more about the the records up to 1825, because as I say, they're relatively freely available on Ancestry and relatively easy to get to. But now we'll come to Joan Rees's index, or the ones that were handed out as prizes just a few minutes ago, and done by Rex and for Aileen and other people. This index to the Colonial Secretary's letters. This is a fairly comprehensive index. It's got a lot of stuff in it. Can you admit the picture, please? And this is for the post-1825 era, and it goes up to 1896. What Joan Rees did, and I'm not quite sure what how they've added to that, but what Joan Rees did was she went through bundles of letters received and took notes of the names and the letter numbers, and not much else detail, and created an index. But she didn't index everything. This is the search page for this, where you go, if you've got the USB, the program on the USB stick, you get a search page like this, and you can type in a name, like we've typed in Robert Byers here, and you'll get a list of the entries in that index for Robert Byers. Now, I don't know whether you can read that, but there's quite a lot of entries here for one fellow called Robert Byers. And some of them relate to Port Macquarie, which is interesting. I'm just wondering what my next slide is. Okay, if you click on it and go to the detail, you get to see the detail. It doesn't really give you much extra information. I have to say, in the searching I've done, Rex can no doubt tell me where to look, but in the searching I've done, see that little box called other information? I don't think I've ever seen anything in that other information box in the ones I've looked at. So you're not, when you look at this detail, you're not getting anything more than you've got on the list, unfortunately. Another name I've searched for is Robert Heath Hall. He should be well known to us Port Macquarie people. He did a diary while he was here at Port Macquarie, and there you get entries for Robert Heath Hall. Again, not much more detail, but you can also search on letter number. Now, I'll just see if I can go, I don't know if I can go back. Let's go back one. You can see that letter number there, this letter number there. We'll go on to the next slide. You can search on that letter number. The reason for doing this is, hey, there's 3 people mentioned in that letter. So does that tell me anything? Well, it may do. Actually, I knew about this one because you will find that letter in Clive's last comments. I thought also I'd have a look for family. Just as a quick look, I decided not to look for any of the Smiths, because I'd probably get, Henry Smith. How many Henry Smiths were there in the colony? So I looked for Jonathan Starr, who was actually my Henry Smith, my great-great-grandfather's brother-in-law. And hey, I got a hit. And I'd never seen anything about this before. I hadn't realised this about him. There's a hit for him. Ship remarks, it says Publican Parramatta. But I've got the letter number, so maybe I can go and find something. So you can see there it is in a bit more detail. And so I went to the card catalogue in Ancestry. Now this time, instead of searching for Colonial Secretary, I searched for colonial letters as keywords. Okay, that's a difference. You search for Colonial Secretary, you will only get the letters up to 1825, if for some reason. If you search for colonial letters, you will get 2 lots of Colonial Secretary's correspondence. See, the term Colonial Secretary appears in both of those titles, but if you search for Colonial Secretary, you'll only find one of them. But if you search for colonial letters, you get both. The mysteries of Ancestry. But the one we want here is this later collection, which has got a date range according to the card catalogue of 1826 to 1856. So we click on that, and this particular collection is only partially indexed. I shudder to think what the proportion of indexing is. I think it's very small. But you can get to the images by browsing. And so you go to browse. Now, what are your options in browse? Your top option is year. And then your next option is volume or surname range. Well, they sort of seem logical headings, don't they? But let's have a look. This is what you get. This is the list of picks you get under year. You're actually getting the titles of New South Wales State Archives Colonial Secretaries Record Series. So these are the series that are there. So you can go and select one of those. And despite what the Ancestry Index tells you, in red, I've highlighted the actual date ranges where they're different. Ancestry is not very good at keeping their records correct for some reason. And this is a whole collection of letters sent. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Colonial Secretary's records, but in the Colonial Secretary's office, correspondence that was received was recorded in the registers of letters received and the indexes to those registers. But all the letters, they kept copies of all the letters they sent out, but they kept them by writing copies into books. And these are the series of books. They obviously sent out so many letters, they just couldn't use one book at the same time. They'd have about 15 different clerks copying letters at the same time. So there were stacks of books. So the letters were copied into the books according to who the letter was going to, or vaguely the subject. They kept the books like that. So here you can see a whole lot of those books. So that letters sent outside the colony was one book, letters sent about convicts was another book. That's mostly letters to the principal superintendent, letters to the Auditor General, etc., etc. And then there's the letters received. They're basically registers or indexes to the letters received. But then there's this one called miscellaneous letters sent, which is a very interesting subject. So if you go there and you get the sub-menu to the miscellaneous letters sent, there's all of these different collections of letters sent, or some of them letters received. I don't know how well you can read up there because it's quite small, unfortunately. There's probably a lot of it, yes. But anyway, we'll now go back to Jonathan Starr, who I'm looking for, this supposedly public in Parramatta. I've got the letter number, so presumably I can search somewhere there. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to the indexes of letters received for the particular year there, 1841 to 1843, because the letter was 1840, had a 42 prefix, meaning 1842 to the letter number. And I click on that and I get to the first frame of microfilm that held by Ancestry. So you can see this is, go along a bit and you can see this is the microfilm copy of the letters received from January to June 1841. So how do I get to the bit I want? Well, there's various ways. You've got these little arrows on the right and the left where you can go through one frame of microfilm at a time. And I don't know whether you can read there, but there's 640 frames of microfilm on this particular reel. Or you can go down here to the bottom part of the view on Ancestry, and you can scroll through a whole lot of frames at one time and scroll through there. Or you can go here, you can see that bit I've got highlighted in the centre there. I blow that up a bit, yes. You can jump your particular frame number if you want to. So here I've said I'm going to go jump to image number 278 out of the 640 and see where I go. And it takes me to this page in index, which is the A's. You can see it looks like it's, I think this is A's by go here. I think I had to go to the second page of the A's. Oh no, I've jumped to another page altogether. This is page frame 367. You've got to do a lot of jumping around in these things. And you can see there the last entry there is Star Jonathan and the number 4688. So I know he's there in the index. And I now know that Joan Rees got the right letter number, or at least got the letter number that the Colonial Secretary's clerk wrote in the index. So let's go to the register. So we go to registers of letters received in the browse section of Ancestry, go down, find in the sub-menu under volume or surname range, the microfilm that's going to cover the letters for the period 1842 to 1843. And there's the first part of the microfilm, and jump through. I can see the first page, letter number 421. So I know I'm in the year 1842. So then it's a matter of then, again, using this jump facility, jump through. And now I've jumping through to page 227 or microfilm frame 227. You can see there I've found letter 4688. If I blow that up a bit, you can see that this is a letter received from the police magistrate at Parramatta, dated the 25th of June, forwarding a certificate in favour of Jonathan Starr for a publican's licence. And if you look at the bottom, you can see it's authorised the 30th of June. So there's another clue. There may be a letter of that date to someone saying this has been authorised, and it may give me more information. The question is, to whom was that letter written? I did a bit of looking on the State Archives website, and I discovered that the certificates or the licences of publicans were actually issued by the Colonial Treasurer. Why the Colonial Treasurer? Probably because there's a fee involved. So I go to letters to the Colonial Treasurer. There's a series called Letters to the Colonial Treasurer. And I can find down in the sub-menu, letters to Auditor and Colonial Treasurer for the date range 1840 to 1843. And these books have indexes at the front of them. And there you can see there's a reference to Star J on page 220. So I go to page 220 and I find a letter or a copy of a letter written by the clerk on the 30th of June. It doesn't tell me much, it just says usual order for a publican's licence to Jonathan Starr at Burwood. Well, I found out that he's obviously at Burwood and that's where he's going to have his pub. So I found a little bit more information. And I can probably use that. I know there's more publican licence records in State Archives. I can go and search them now if I want to. But I found this from Colonial Secretaries. So now we'll go back to, I go back to this slot here. You can see where I've searched for that particular letter and got 3 entries. But let me just go back. You see the letter number 478603. You can read that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when I go to the register of letters received for the top one, 1847, 8603 is a letter from the auditor. A memorandum respecting an adjustment of advance or something to a colonial agent, etc., etc. Doesn't sound very relevant to convicts. But if I go to the register of letters received for 1846, I find another letter, 8603, furnishing police histories of Cook and R.H. Hall, specials at Port Macquarie. So I'm sorry, it looks like Joan put the wrong year down. She said 47 instead of 46, 8603. So this is why it may pay to check those entries against some of the entries in the register indexes to letters received in the Colonial Secretary's office. And there is my transcription of that letter, which appears in Port Macquarie's Last Convicts, of which, of course, you all have.
All your society.
Yes.
Okay, now we'll jump back to Robert Byers. He also gets mentioned in Port Macquarie's Last Convicts. He was a special who was here in 1846. But obviously he stayed beyond 1846 because we get references to 1847. Yes.
You come back to that on to Frank, on the text there,
Go back, okay. Rex wants me to go back. Where do you want me to go back? That's it.
Okay, it talks about the there is a reference to.
Hold on, stop.
Rex is asking a question. We'll see if we can get people to hear the question.
Clive, it states in there, transmit to you the police histories of the special convicts. Would that have been an attachment? Would that have been recorded in those registers?
Yes, Rex has just asked, you can see here, there's a reference to police histories of the special convicts. Yes, but the police histories were attached to this letter and are also transcribed in Port Macquarie's Last Convicts. The police histories were documents that were compiled, written up at the time following a request from the Colonial Secretary, written up by a clerk in the Principal Superintendent of Convicts Office, a clerk who was presumably a forger because his handwriting was absolutely beautiful. And he wrote up, it listed every infraction those convicts had committed since they arrived in the colony. And that was all written up from, remember the reference in the journals to the black books? That was all written up from the black books that were in the Superintendent of Convicts Office. Those black books in New South Wales that have now been destroyed, or were destroyed in the 1880s. Unfortunately. Okay, well, we'll go back to where we were. Thank you for your question, Rex. This stuff's all very interesting. Okay, I've said, okay, you can see all this in Port Macquarie's Last Convicts. This particular letter is transcribed in Port Macquarie's Last Convicts, page 58. And this particular, but now we've jumped to another letter. I've gone into the register and having searched for Robert Byers, so I'll run you through some of the stuff I found relating to Robert Byers in the registers and the related things. So here is in the register of letters received, a letter from the police magistrate at Port Macquarie in April 1847 requesting the appointment of Robert Byers as Inspector of Slaughterhouses at Blackman's Point. And you can see there, he was appointed on the 3rd of May. So on the 3rd of May, if I go to another series, this is a series of letters to the police. I find a letter dated the 3rd of May from the Colonial Secretary. So basically saying, I do myself the honour to inform you that in compliance with the recommendation contained in your letter, His Excellency the Governor has been pleased to appoint Mr. Robert Byers to be Inspector of Slaughterhouses and of cattle intended to be slaughtered at Blackman's Point and its vicinity, and that the usual notification will appear in the Gazette. But of course, Mr. Byers will only receive as his remuneration the fees authorised by the Act. If you're interested in the naming of the 5 rule, that for Guglielmo, the Latin for William, because William IV was the king at the time that Act was passed. Okay, another letter about Robert Byers. This is the letter from Robert Byers I found in the Register of Letters Received. Again, his residence is given as the Blackman's Point Ferry. He didn't actually date this letter, but it was received on the 2nd of August, proposing to erect a ferry house, build a boat and stockyard on condition of the ferry being leased to him for 3 years. One of the last things in the Port Macquarie's Last Convicts was where Robert Byers had earlier been granted the lease to operate the ferry at Blackman's Point for 1 year. This is back in 1846. So here he wants to do a bit more. What happens until the convict establishment was closed in 1847, the ferry was actually run by the government or by the convict administration. There were, I think, 6 convicts stationed out of Blackman's Point to run the ferry. I don't know whether they charged people or not, but anyway, because it was run by convicts, a ferry was necessary for people to get across the river if people were travelling up to the Macleod or anywhere else. Once the convict establishment closed, the ferry was privatised. The government sold the lease of the ferry to Robert Byers for a year, and he presumably charged people to be ferried across. And now he's found this a good business, so he wants to continue. And now he wants to build a house. So you can see the result of this application is referred to the bench at Port Macquarie on the 6th of October. And here on the 5th of October, we have a letter dated the 5th of October. This is back to Robert Byers. This is apparently a transcription, printed letter informing him that it has been found necessary to refer to the bench of magistrates at Port Macquarie, his communication proposing to erect the buildings. I guess they just want confirmation from the magistrates, who in a sense are the civil authorities in Port Macquarie, that this is okay and they're happy for this to go on. And here we have the letter transmitting it to the bench of magistrates, giving the details. So in this letter, we're getting more information than we've got from the entry in the register telling us the register of the letter that Robert Byers sent when it was received by the Colonial Secretary. We've still not actually seen Robert Byers' letter because that's in a bundle at State Archives and has not been microfilmed. So it's not available online. But we're getting a whole lot of the information from these other letters that have been written. And one of the things that happens with a lot of the outward letters, whether if they're replying to a letter, they often give a summary of what they're replying to. If they're forwarding a letter, they often give a summary of what they're forwarding. So you get quite a lot of information. Another letter from Robert Byers, again, he's undated this letter, but it was received on the 10th of October. This is requesting a reply to his application to lease the ferry for 3 years because he doesn't think he's seen a reply. And here's the reply to that letter from the Colonial Secretary requesting, I have to acknowledge the receipt of your letter requesting a reply to your former letter, etc., and refer you to my letter. It's surprising that the same had been referred to the report to the bench at Port Macquarie. So who knows what the postal system was like in those days, but it goes on. And then here back into the register of letters received. Here we have a register of a letter received from the bench at Port Macquarie reporting on Robert Byers' application to lease the Blackman's Point ferry. And you can see that the result of the application here that this letter has been referred to the auditor on the 4th of November. So here we can get the letter to the auditor. And the auditor they're asking the auditor is whether are there any available funds which could be appropriated for the erection of a weatherboard cottage and the purchase of a new boat, estimated at £27 10 shillings. We're now getting a sum. We're knowing how much it might cost. And then we get, again, back to the register of letters received, a record of a letter from the auditor reporting that no sum has been voted for the erection of a cottage or a boat at Blackman's Point Ferry. And then you can see there's in the result of application column, they've written 49/760. Well, that's actually a reference to another letter that they've received. And this is obviously a letter from Robert Byers because this is from the index. And here we have the register entry for this letter 49/760, again from Robert Byers, Blackman's Point, dated the 19th of January, proposing to erect a ferry house, etc. Expenses will be allowed out of the rent. And then there are further letters in reference to a letter dated the 2nd of February. So again, we'll go back to letters to the Auditor and Colonial Treasurer. Well, these books are all indexed to the letters out, often to the subject of the letter as well. So you can see a couple of references there to Robert Byers in the index. And here we have a letter to the Treasurer dated the 2nd of February. And this letter has a lovely amount of detail. We're knowing the weatherboard cottage is going to cost £20. a new boat, £7 10 shillings. And he's proposed to erect 2 small stockyards and 3 lines of fencing for £12. Although I think that's my typo where I say 39 there. I think it should be 20, probably should be £27 10. I think I've made a typo there.
No, you're right. 20 plus 7 plus 4 is 39.
Don't forget the top one.
Oh, okay, yes, okay, so, yeah, maybe I may be wrong, yes. Okay, and the expenses,
He's our treasurer.
yes, I'm the treasurer. I'm adding up, yes. I'm also good at typos. In this one, they're advising the treasurer that the bench of magistrates has been authorised to accept Mr. Byers' offer on the understanding the work has been performed to their satisfaction before any payment is made, and the expenses to be charged to Crown revenues. So it looks as if all this is going to go ahead. And here we have a reply from the Colonial Treasurer. And another letter here back to the Colonial Treasurer, in which it says the amount is to be defrayed out of the Crown revenue, and any claim to that amount will be dispersed on proper vouchers certified by the magistrate. So you can see bureaucracy at work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Another letter from Robert Byers. Now here he's applying for the old punt. Now the one that's being replaced presumably by the new boat, and whether he has to pay rent as usual, because he obviously thinks if he's spending money on new things, maybe he'll just won't have to pay the rent.
Oh, clever.
You know, clever, just in case he doesn't get paid. So here's a reply back to him that they're saying he may consider the old punt to be his property as part of the conditions of his accepted offer for the improvement of the ferry. However, as regards the sum to be deducted from the rental, no, that's not going to. He's got to continue to pay the rent without any deduction whatsoever. And the amount of his claim will be disbursed from the Colonial Treasury in due course on production of proper vouchers duly certified by the magistrates of the district. No. Yes, so there we go. And okay, and then another letter from Robert Byers, and a letter from the bench of magistrates reporting completion of the buildings. And you can see this is, and then there's a response back to the bench 16th of February. Now I've highlighted that 16th of February because this is what's written in the register of letters received. That's supposedly the date of the reply to the magistrates. But here's the letter to the magistrates, and it's the 26th of February. So the clerks are not immune from typos either. And here they are, they're saying that the Auditor General has reported that the sum payable to Mr. Byers has been placed in warrant for liquidation, by which I assume that means he will actually get paid at in due course. So there we are. And then there's more correspondence. Here's a letter from the Port Master forwarding to the Colonial Secretary. The Port Master was one of the colonial officials in charge of the ports in the colony. And he's received a memorial from Robert Byers, lessee of the punt Blackman's Ferry, for payment of expenses incurred between 1847 and 1850. And there's an answer given, and the answer basically, because it basically tells you what the expenses are. He's had to purchase warps for the use of the punt. You all know what the warps are. They're the ropes that guide the punt across the river. Yes. And that's been decided that the condition of the lease was, because of the condition of the lease was he should give up boats, punts, chains, ropes, fastening, etc. in good condition at the end of the lease. He's bound to keep them in the same state during the lease, that his application cannot be ascertained. I'm not quite sure about the word ascertain. I'm sure they probably mean entertain rather than ascertain, but never mind. In other words, he's not going to get refunded the cost of the warps.
It was worth a try.
It was worth a try, yes. Got it quite wrong. Another letter from the Port Master and a reply to to the port master, directed by the governor to inform Mr. Byers application cannot be complied with, there being no regulation that the warp should be provided by the government at the time of the lessee taking possession of a ferry. Now, this is actually interesting because if you go to Poppencore's Last Convicts and you see the letter, Byers' application for when he first took the ferry on, he agreed as part of that he would supply a new warp. You know,
He's
so
tried.
He's tried. He wasn't a special for no reason, was he? So there we are. Now, in going through all of this, and I've highlighted to you some of the problems that you find in the indexes, I decided I'd try and record some of those problems. So I thought I'll just start recording a few bits. So I've ended up using a guide to accessing them online.
Is this the 47-page?
This is the 47-page, 48-page thing. Yes. Yes, some of the anomalies. Now, I mean, letters sent, you've got this sort of huge collection of letters sent. Now, if you go into letters sent, you'll find governors and colonial secretaries. But if you're looking for, let me just highlight this at the top. If you're looking for Port Macquarie Court of Petty Sessions, copies of letters received 1832 to 1837, they're down there under miscellaneous letters sent, governors and colonial secretaries minutes. You've got to go to that microfilm to get to these records. How would you know that? You're not going to know that. I don't even know of state archives. But that's where you've got to go to get that one. Another example, and this is in the indexes and registers of letters received. If you want the registers of letters received for 30th January 1854 to 30th June 1885, you've got to go to miscellaneous letters sent and look under letters re-immigration 14 December 1852 to 1879. Who would think of doing that? I mean there is a collection. There is a collection of registers of letters. There is a collection of letters in the registers of letters received, and they're all listed except for those volumes. So you've got to go elsewhere for them. Letters sent re-convicts. Most of the letters sent re-convicts are here, but there are some down here from 1830 to 1831 under letters to Western Port, under miscellaneous letters. So Western Port was a convict establishment. I'm not quite sure where it was offhand.
Victoria?
It could have been after 1831. Look, I'm honestly not sure, but it was a brief establishment, one of the briefest temporary establishments, and there are letters to it. And there are letters to it, but for this particular volume of letters to re-convicts, and Ancestry's indexed them under that, presumably because they're on the same roll of microfilm that the letters to Western Port are on, or something like that. I mean, I guess you can't blame the poor people in the Philippines or wherever who have English as a second language who do Ancestry's indexing. Can't be expected to know the full history of New South Wales convict establishments and whatever. So this is some of the stuff I put into the guide. So what I did was I started going through all those hits and then quickly sort of scrolling through the microfilms on Ancestry to find what was in each one and whatever. So I've tried to record for you the date range of a relevant series I've recorded. You can see here the relevant item numbers from State Archives, the State Archives microfilm number, and then the menu pick. This is under and the sub menu. And I've also given you the frames numbers for a range of frame numbers for Ancestry to help you jump to the right collection of images for them. So this is why
Society's published a new one.
this is why it's 47 pages. And for the indexes and registers of letters received, similarly, at the back, there's a couple of pages of tables like this, so that you can see that for the year 1826, letter numbers are got these image numbers and whatever, if you're looking in the registers. So just to help people use this stuff on Ancestry and get to it more quickly. I mean, I worked out after a while that if you see the range of film numbers, frame numbers, and if it's about 800, it probably means there's 3 volumes of books in that microfilm of about 250 to 280 pages each. So you can jump those sort of frame numbers or something like that, and you take it as you go. But I thought if you've got the right frame numbers, it's a help. Now, for some of them are available on Family Search.
That's cool.
So where I've gone through Family Search as far as I can, but the card catalogue in Family Search is very hard to search for this sort of stuff. And it's unclear whether all the State Archives microfilms are available on Ancestry Search. Certainly, a lot of them were done by the Mormons, so they ought to be, but it's not always easy to find them. Where I have found them and where they are available, where you can actually get to the images, I have taken the film numbers from Ancestry Search and put them into the guide from Family Search. Family Search.
Yeah.
And put them into the Family Search film numbers and put them into the guide. So, and they are always, as you can see, a 7-digit film number, which distinguishes them from the State Archives film numbers. So you'll find that in the guide too. And so if you go to Family Search, you can search in the catalogue by film number. As you can see, and you can type in the film number. This is letters sent, you can see obviously from this film, you can get to it. And if you've got this little image with the camera here that you can see without a key over it, it means you can view the images, and there you are. You can get to them on Family Search. Now, the thing you do have to do on Family Search is you do have to sign in. But I mean, your account is free, but you do have to sign. The frame, the image, you've got the image number. You can jump to image numbers in Family Search. I've done here image 188 and gone to that. They may not be quite the same as they are on Ancestry, the image numbers, because Ancestry have often imposed a false image as a title at the beginning of whatever, something like that, which may and so I've just gone by the Ancestry image numbers. So the ones in Family Search may be slightly different. But there you are, you can get to a lot of that stuff there too. So there you are. Thank you.